And welcome to another episode of Shaman's Way. We're on our 9th episode and excited to bring you another story, Kriket. What story are you sharing with us today?
Today I am sharing the story of sealskin. It is an Inuit story based on the legend of similar to the Selkie or the other seal women that are around in our cultures and in our heritages. However, I digress. The intention of our discussion tonight is to discuss the implications of delving deeply into the spirit of water and where the spirit of water takes you from an intuitive perspective, how it discusses the death aspect of the soul, how it discusses the initiation aspect of the soul, and how the water is one of the messengers of spirit and transition of relationship of soul to the rest of the world, or even spirit. So, let me start off the story, and the story is called Sealskin. A long time ago, but really not that long ago, because time, well, nothing ever spins in a straight line. Everything kind of goes in simple terms. But in a land far away, but actually not that far away, because this is an Inuit tale, so really it is really not just hours away from where I stand in Canada. So a long time ago, but we already established that, was a fisherman, and he was a lonely, lonely fisherman. And he had cried for days and days and days he had cried. He'd cried so long and so hard that he had worn rivets in his skin from his eyes to his chin. He had permanent cracks in his face. One day, he was out in his kayak attempting to catch fish, and he stayed over long, for he was unsuccessful in his hunt. And as the darkness fell, he slowly paddled his kayak towards home. And he spied in the distance a great light, and the light shone upon this huge stone in the middle of the ocean. And as he paddled his kayak up closer, he could see 12 women, naked, dancing in this light, and surrounding the 12 women were 12 sealskins. And the women had long bodies and long fingers and long toes and beautiful long hair that goes only they know. And as the fisherman became entranced, he slowly and very quietly rowed his kayak closer and closer to the rock. The young ladies ceased in their dance as the time had ended and began to hurriedly pull on their sealskins, patting them close to the skin, and the fisherman reached out and grabbed one of the sealskins, stuffed it into his parka. At long last, the last woman searched around for her sealskin. And the fisherman said, "I will take you to my home. I will give you everything you need if you agree to come and live with me for 7 years. But I can't," she said. "My home is in the ocean. I can't come with you." "But I have your sealskin, and I am so lonely, and I am in love with you, and I would love for you to come to my place and to dwell with me as my wife." Believing she had no choice, the woman got within the kayak, and slowly they rowed the boat to the center, and away from the center to the shore. And for 7 years, everything went accordingly. She was reasonably happy. They in turn had a child, a son that they named Aruk. And as this beautiful woman lived longer on the land, she noticed within the 7th year that her skin began to get dry and crack and hurt. She noticed that her vision was getting dimmer, and she often walked with hands outstretched so that she would not bump into any of the furniture in the skin shack they lived in. Her eyes, even the eyelids above her eyes, became so dry they cracked, and her eyelashes fell, and her hair became so thin, so this once beautiful woman looked sick and pale. One night, Aruk heard his parents in heated argument, and his mother was saying, "Give me back my sealskin. It has been 7 years. I have done everything you have asked of me." Asmi says, "Are you kidding me? I'm not going to give you back your sealskin. You're going to abandon me and leave me alone to care for my son all by myself. Who's going to cook my meals? Who's going to take care of my son? You're not getting your sealskin back at all." And Aruk had heard this, and it troubled him. And he tossed, and he turned, and he worried, for he heard his mother weeping. He tossed, and he turned, and then he heard this sound. Was it a dream? Did he really just hear that? And he jumped out of bed, and he ran past his mother, and she felt the whoosh of his body as he ran through the opening of the skin shack, ran down over top of the rocks and over the rocks to the cliff, all the while hearing And he gets to the top of the cliff, and there's a light shining down, and in the middle, far away, but he can see, is an old male seal. And his whiskers were so long they touched his chest. And his hair was so white it was a mane upon his head. And above him the aurora borealis, they danced. It changed shapes. First he saw a bear, and then he saw a fox, and then he saw what looked like a door opening and closing, and all the while, compelled as he was, he ran down the cliff, and he tripped and he fell over a rock. No, wait, it wasn't a rock. What was that? And he dusted off the gravel, for it had been buried for a very long time. And all of a sudden, he realized it was a sealskin. And he took it to his mouth and his nose, and he breathed it in, and whoosh, his mother's soul came and slammed into his body, and he could feel her happiness. He could feel and see where she had come from, where her home had been, and he lifted that sealskin to his face again, and he breathed it in again, and whoosh, her soul slammed through his body, and he felt joy and excitement and the ability to move lithely. And crying, he ran up the side of the hill, all the while, encouraging his feet, and he ran faster and faster and faster and faster until he became to the skin shack, and he ran through, and his mother's grabbed him up in his arms, and she smelled him, and she didn't know who in that moment she loved more, her sealskin or her child. And she put her child down, And she picked up her sealskin and she started to get into it, and she patted her body, making it tight and close, and she could feel herself becoming alive and alive. And she picked up the small things that she owned, and she didn't own very much, and she tucked them into her sealskin, and she's closing up the front. And Aruk says, "Ma, what about me? Are you going to abandon me? Are you going to leave me here?" So she thinks about it for a long time, or what seemed like a long time to the little boy standing at her feet, not wanting to be abandoned. And her soul could feel the call of the ocean. Her soul could feel the call of her home. And finally she decided, and she picked up her boy as though he was a blubber sack, and she ran as quickly as she could, tripping over rocks and getting up and stumbling, not caring how her feet hurt. All she longed to do was go home. And down she went, down over the cliff and into the water, and she starts to swim. And Rook says, "But Mum, I cannot swim, I cannot swim." And she turns to him, and she takes his face within his hands, and she breathes. And again. And she took Aruk by the hand, and she slowly crossed the threshold of the land of air into the land of water. And slowly she swam down, and beneath her was that beautiful old seal with the whiskers so long they touched his chin, and the hair on its head so white. He was magnificent, and this was the boy's grandfather. And as the mother slowly swims up to the grandfather, they greet each other and slowly undulate within the water. And the father says, "Is this the child?" And the mother replies, "Yes, this is your grandson." I see, he says. "You know he cannot stay," she says. "I know, but it will be okay for a while." And they take him down to the ocean's floor, and there she was reunited with her sisters, and he got to see all the things that his mother had told him about. For as a boy, she told him all the stories that she could remember of all the creatures that lived below the water's boundaries. And his father had shared with him stories about all the animals that lived within the tundra, and the seals, and the polar bear, and the ermine, and the lemming, the animals that lived there. So he knew what to expect when he saw the beauty, but he was unprepared for the impact of the emotion that his mother went through, reunion with her family. And he stayed for 7 days and for 7 nights. And the mother came to the grandfather and said, "You know, it is time." And the grandfather said, "Yes, I know it is time." And on one side he held one hand, and the mother on the other side, she held the other hand. And slowly, so very slowly, they swam him, gently rocking him from the bottom of the ocean floor to the crest of the threshold between the land of water and the land of air. And slowly they paddled him to shore, and the great seal, the old seal, stayed back from the shore, and the mother took him as far as she could. And he cried, and he said, "Mother, you can't leave me, you can't abandon me." And she opened up the front of her sealskin, and she took out her knife, and she took out her fire sticks, and she gave them to him, and she said, "I have given you everything. I've given you everything I own. I have showed you my place beneath the ocean. I have given you my breath. My breath will allow your voice to become beautiful in song and eloquent in speech." And the boy cried and cried, and his tears were even more salty than they had been before. And the mother swam out and was greeted by the grandfather, and they swam further away, and you know and I know that they turned and they waved, and the boy cried and waved from the shore, and you know and I know that the separation of mother and son and grandfather and grandson was not an easy separation. And it was said that the boy then had a magical touch. For when he went to the oceans or to fish, the fish literally jumped out of the water and into his net. And other times he could be seen kneeling on the great rock in the middle of the ocean and talking to a female seal, the one they called the Shining One. And all the hunters wanted to kill her, and all the hunters wanted to catch her, but none of them could. And it wasn't until that Uruk was an old man that he told where his magic came from. And over the years he became a beautiful singer, and over the years he became the most eloquent bard and storyteller. And over the years he was told, it was foretold, that he would heal and have the healing hands. And sure enough, he had that magical touch. And that is the end of the story. When I first heard that story, I really connected to the element of water with it. I really connected to that element of the subconscious and the superconscious self. And I think that when we come to a place of recognizing our own essence, the depth of ourself, that's where we end up when west on the medicine wheel. The boundary and the threshold between air and between water is that threshold or that place between the ability to breathe on our own and then the ability to rely on spirit to take you through an element you're unfamiliar with and still maintain you safe. This story had so many beautiful elements to it. If we were on the east of the medicine wheel, we could see that the child is that divine child. And when we see a child in stories, whether it's the hero's journey, whether it's even the devil with the 3 golden hairs, we see that children are called into place because they are that which is potential. They are that which can be changed. Something is coming into that place. I also like water because it is the entry point into the psyche. And water from the perspective of the deep psyche is traveling down. When the mother decides to leave the medial world, leave the mundane world, leave that world of mankind and travel home, the soul, her soul, that spirit, that effervescent spirit of water had sacrificed itself to become a human form. In many ways, when we are coming to the dark night of the soul, we do indeed have that aspect of us that is above water, trying to keep our head above water. How many times have we heard that when we talk about how we're feeling or what we're doing? I'm just trying to keep my head above water. How are you feeling? I'm just trying to keep my head above water. And even that talks about the threshold. So if we go down into that threshold, if we go below the water, then we're going to die. Just like this young boy in the story. He went down below the water for 7 days and for 7 nights, which is, absolutely a very deep and spiritual number, which we won't dedicate time to this evening. But I also know that you're going to be aware of the number 7 as a divine number in the first place anyway. As that child dies, the child, as it is reborn, it then has the ability to have a gift from the world of spirit and a gift from the world of matter. So the coming together in any point between the elements, in the point between air and water, is that cross, that place of crossingness. In the center of the medicine wheel, we have the place of the crossing, the blue road and the red road, the world of matter and the world of spirit. So this divine child, this child who has been resurrected, is also like the soul that comes out once your head goes below the water, once you have that spiritual death, once you move up into consciousness again, as we do in the West, and as we move further north on the medicine wheel, then we come into that sense of spirit. So the physical has to die, and then as we move north on the medicine wheel, we come into that land of spirit. Water is also one of the elements that has incredible guardians. There are the whale guardians. There is beautiful stories that are associated with water in the Inuit people. Skeleton Woman comes to mind. Sedna comes to mind. These are stories of the deepest part of the consciousness. In Skeleton Woman, when the fisherman puts down his hook and he pulls up the skeleton and it frightens him, it's the same as you or I going into and pulling the very bones of who we are and having to see the very bones of who we are. In shamanism, there's a term, and I'm sure in other traditions as well, where we talk about being the hollow bone. And when we are going through an initiatory process, when we're going through an initiatory dark night of the soul, call it what you will, we are attempting to clean ourselves out so that we truly are the hollow bone, and that messages and wisdom are not stuck on our perception. They're not stuck on our wounds. They're not stuck on the aspects of ourself that would delay a message or not allow a message to come through. So to be that hollow bone in that initiatory process. And dying is a difficult process. And in West, we ask ourselves to become the guardians. We become the elders of the community. So we become the guardians of the community. So West talks about that rising of consciousness and the spinning of the wheel that has gathered so much knowledge from the East running through the South, from the South all up to the West. We've got the gathering and the accumulation of knowledge. So in West is where we really start to see that wheel spin and become into wisdom. And then from that wisdom, the wisdom is then born again in the East, only it is born in its own matter of simplicity and youth again. So there's a constant, continuous turn of the wheel. In the West, we have the elements of water spirits that can be very frightening at times as well, but that's a whole other story. There are lots of water stories that are dedicated to danger and to mystery. And I think that talks about the shadow side of the soul more than the sealskin talks about. The sealskin doesn't really talk about the dark side of the soul or the shadow of the soul, but rather a soul longing to come home. When we live disassociated, and many of us live disassociated, we are encouraged, just like our song is having that song. When that grandfather was in the middle of the ocean and singing, the boy simply could have turned over and fallen asleep, but he didn't. He listened to his intuition. West is that strong sense of intuition, that pulling of that intuition. Where there is clarity and illumination in the East, there is that awakening and that pulling of a different type of illumination and clarity in the West. This is the illumination and clarity of time well fought or time well spent. So we have a different view of what clarity is in the West than we do from the East, opposite side of the medicine wheel, of course. Also, the other aspect of this story that I like is the grandfather and the mother coming together. And we have that trinity in a sense. So we have the wisdom of the grandfather who, when he spoke about his grandson, you could almost feel the sound waves of pride coming off of his chest. When he allowed his grandson to come into the waters to die, that's that's wisdom coaching us to come to the deepest depths of who we are, and that's wisdom giving us the opportunity to experience the beauty of being home in spirit, experience the beauty of bringing that aspect home. And it was the mother, the one who gave birth to the young boy, who was the cautionary voice. So we have that maternal side of ourselves, that cautionary voice that's always like, okay, I'll give you some period of time to be here, but then we have to get back up to the surface. So when we have a healthy relationship to our psyche and to our consciousness, we have that ability to bring ourself out of something or trigger something to get us out of it. So in her case, it was the grandfather and her and the limitation, the boundary of 7 days and 7 nights that she had set. So when we come into the West, there are going to be challenges, but in and amongst those challenges are also going to be incredible rewards. So the young boy went through a period of the dark night of the soul. I'm sure he did. He would have been bereaved and bereft of his mother. He would have gone and come home to an emotionally distant father, if there was any father at all. He could have become the stone child. There are other Inuit tales that talk about the stone child or the frozen child. He could have become that. He could have followed into the footsteps of his father in matter and become an angry person and a sorrowful person, so sorrowful that they cry so much that they have, cracks in their skin. He chose not to. He chose to use his magical gift to empower his life. So in some of the other lessons we've talked about how do we integrate healing? How do we, once we've had a soul retrieval, an extraction, compassion, depossession, balancing, learn to journey, how do we integrate those lessons into our body and manifest them out? Those are the lessons of West, how we combine the intellectual, the physical, and now the emotional aspects of mankind. And then as we move north on the medicine wheel, we come into the spiritual. So we have the 4 aspects of humankind. And West is that accumulation of the world, the Eastern view or the mental view that we live through seeing. And the physical view of the South is we live through being and through doing. And then the aspect of we live through experiencing in the West. We live through increased awareness. We live through increased perception. We have many cycles in the West, so we have many tiny deaths. We have many times where we have been challenged. We have many times that we've been initiated. Sometimes in an entire day, it can feel as though you've gone around the medicine wheel. You woke up with a great day. You had a really challenging afternoon. You got into an argument in the evening and you come to peace and you go to bed. These are some of the lessons of West and some of the lessons of water. The lessons of the psyche are deep and truly individual. I leave you here for now and know that this is a topic favorite in my heart, and I will revisit it once again. Back to you, my friend Doug.
That's very cool, and some fantastic imagery there, and great story as always, so thank you very much for sharing that.
Thank you.
For everyone out there as well who would like to learn more about shamanism, we're very excited to announce that we're going to be launching our first course. This will be a bit more of a beginner's course, shamanism simplified, if you will. And we're going to be going over a lot of the components of how to run ceremony, the tools that shamans typically use in ceremony, some of the basic medicines used, and to ensure that you have something actionable out of the course as well is we will be presenting how to do house cleanings, house clearings using shamanic tool sets. So if you're interested in that, it's going to be fairly limited enrollment. We'll likely be opening that enrollment in June with hopefully the course starting in July. We're just trying to finish some parts of that up. But head on over to shamansway.net, and at the top in the menu you should see a link that says Learn Practical Shamanism, and you can sign up for the mailing list there and we'll be, because this is our first course, it'll be a fairly incentivized pricing on the course that we probably won't offer again. So if you want to be the first one in there and help us shape the way we teach and the courses that we provide within Shaman's Way, head on over to shamansway.net to sign up for that class.